Yeah, we're going to do some activities in the middle of class. So if you guys participate in that, you guys can get some candy or a card. Alright, so my name is Jacob Hazy. I'm a student from Morningside, so I'm going to be doing a practicum with Mr. Doppelheiner today, and I'm going to lead you guys in class for the majority of it. We're going to go over the Revolutionary War today, and you guys have your KWLs out already, so I wanted to start off quickly with what do you guys know about the Revolutionary War? If you guys call out, like right now, raise your hands. You can get a piece of candy or a card.
Or a cutie.
Or a cutie. Yeah. Yeah.
Great Britain went broke after the war they had, so they had to tax the 13 colonies, and that's where it started.
Right, so the 7 Years' War, we're going to get into that, so that's very good. What would you like, cutie candy or the card?
Give me
Orange?
orange. Yes.
Anybody else? Can you tell me anything about the Revolutionary War? So the first thing we need to understand is where we go back to the very beginning of what a colony is and how England colonized the New World and North America. So the 13 colonies we refer to are on the east coast of North America, and they were governed by Great Britain, like I already said. And a colony is generally considered to be a country or area under full or partial control of another country. So the colonies that were established in the New World by Britain were established for a variety of different reasons, but they were established under British control, and they remained under British control until eventually where we end up with the War for Independence. And some of the reasons they had were for making money for England and for Britain, escaping religious persecution, and then they wanted to create new governments and try to basically create the new world to be better than England ever was. So I have 3 examples, and we're going to go through really quickly the first colonies that were established in the New World. These colonies were the Jamestown colony, the Plymouth colony, and the Massachusetts Bay colony. And each one of them, like I said, had different reasons for being established, and we're going to get into that here in a second. And once we're done with that, I'm going to have you guys individually research one of the other 12 colonies that are left, or 11 colonies that are left, and then you're going to present really quickly, and then I ask you guys questions about them, like that, okay? So, like I said, the first colony established was Jamestown in 1607. You guys may know this one. Have any of you seen the film Pocahontas? Okay. Wildly inaccurate film, but it is Jamestown. John Smith was there. He wasn't blonde, but he was there. Pocahontas was a real person as well. Again, actions in that movie are wildly inaccurate, but so it was the first one. The reason why this was the first and most important one was that it was established by the Virginia Company of London with the primary purpose of economic gain. They were trying to get the resources that Christopher Columbus had discovered in the New World, things like gold, lumber, or things like that they could extract and make England richer with. But the other thing is, because it was the first one, this became the foothold for other successive settlements to come from. So people would come to Jamestown, land there, and then go off and venture into their next area. And that's actually how we get the Plymouth colony, which was the second one established in 1620, so this is 13 years after the first one was established. And it was established in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Maine, right where they all connect in the corner. And I'll show you on the map here in a second where that is, but it wasn't intentional that they established it where they did. Actually, you guys may have already learned about the Mayflower, and this is the ship that sailed over with all the pilgrims on it. And they were trying to get to Jamestown, but missed. And just landed, and they didn't have a choice. They kind of had to just deal with the cards they were dealt, and ultimately they established a thriving colony. But they weren't trying so much to get economic benefits for England and Great Britain, but they were trying to establish a place for people who were trying to free the Church of England. And I don't know how much we talked about that previously, but the Church of England was extremely oppressive to new ideological thought, and so trying to get away with the New World was the best option for most people who were trying to practice the religion that they believed in. And so then the third colony was established in the Massachusetts Bay. which was established in 1630 in modern day Massachusetts, as you might assume. But this one was established by the Puritans, and they were also trying to get religious freedom, but they weren't necessarily trying to get away from the Church of England entirely. They were trying to change the Church of England and make themselves the city on a hill, which is a good excerpt. I don't know if you guys ever get to read that one, but highly recommend it. Where they wanted to be the model example for civilization moving forward. And a whole bunch of interesting stuff happens there, but we don't get to get into it today, unfortunately, because this is just a tip of the iceberg of what I get to talk about. But these are just some of the reasons why they were established. Economic reasons and religious reasons were the primary motivators. And then when we get into the next ones we're going to talk about, those are typically the concept going forward. So with that being said, I'm going to show you guys really quick just where they are. Plymouth would have been right about here, in this bay right here, and then Massachusetts in this bay, and then finally Virginia was down here in this little crux. So you guys can choose any colony except for Virginia and Massachusetts, because I already talked about the two biggest colonies that were established. So everything else is on the table. Go ahead and research something like that. I want you to tell me about when it was established and why it was established, and then also the who. I don't think I included that there, but like I said, don't use Virginia or Massachusetts. You guys should have about 10 minutes of this. And you see that we're getting close to done. We're gonna just move on to the discussion part, okay? And you guys can write that on the back side of your KWL sheet for ease. But yeah, just go ahead and get started. If you have questions or you're struggling to find some sources, let me know and I'll come around and talk, okay?
Caitlin, since you're just coming in, Mr. Hossie is having you guys pick one of the colonies there, except for Virginia or Massachusetts, and find out why and when it was founded, how it was founded, any information you can about it.
You can charge your computer. Yeah. If it's dead, you can go ahead and move it far just for now. Just to research it really quick. But get it plugged in and all that, but do that as soon as I can.
Which one do you want? No, I'm going to York. He said it's not in Pennsylvania. He said,
No.
Virginia.
Virginia and Massachusetts. So Pennsylvania is on the board.
I was listening.
Okay, no, fine.
Are we all getting close to being finished up, or we still need a little bit? Okay. Let me know. Don't forget, if you share out, you get a piece of candy. So.
Go for it, you're doing great.
Alright, so sorry to interrupt you guys, but we're gonna get started with the discussion part of this whole thing. So I saw you guys did pretty good research, so is there anyone who'd like to go first, talk about the colony research?
I researched Georgia and it was found January 2nd, 1788, and it was found to establish a colony in New World for the North, and also for anyone who wished for a fresh start.
Yep, very good. Were you up next, you know what it's up?
Yeah, I researched Georgia, but it was founded on February 12th, 1733. It was the only colony to ban slavery, Rome, lawyers, and Catholics from the beginning. It was the last of the 13 colonies to be founded.
Oh, wait.
Look at all this
I
participation.
know, when you incentivize it.
Yeah.
Alright,
Mine's
what do you got?
Me?
Yeah.
I did Pennsylvania. It was founded March 4th, 1681. They found it because they thought it was a safe haven for the waste
You guys quiet so you can hear.
in Europe. And William Penn founded it.
Very nice. Very good. Pennsylvania is founded by William Penn, specifically for the Quakers. You guys seen Quaker oats at the store? Same people, they're bland.
Okay, guys,
I'll get you next, okay? What do you got?
I did the Georgia colony, and the Georgia colony was established in 1732 by James, I don't know how to say his last name, a former army officer, and was the last of the 13 British colonies in North America.
Very nice. We got you right here.
Oh, I did the New York colony, and it was founded on 1664. It was founded as a trade center and imperial commercials, and the founder was
The Dutch?
yeah,
Alright, I was gonna ask you, what's the original name of New York?
I don't even know, I didn't.
Okay. Anyone know?
Is it New England?
No, it's new something.
New Hampshire.
No, not quite. It's none of the names that are up there. It used to be called this, and now it's called New York. It used to be called New Amsterdam because Amsterdam is in the Netherlands and those are the Dutch. But there you go.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, the Dutch are the.
It's new, it's different.
Alright, I'll do one more and we'll move on. So. Okay.
I did.
Oh wait, I already got you an orange.
No, I won't even ask for
Right here.
anything. I just wanted to talk about it.
Yeah,
Oh,
go
well,
ahead.
Go ahead and talk about it.
Okay, I did South Carolina, and it was originally founded
noblemen, and it was used to keep Spanish away from certain territories in North America, but it became a colony in 1712, and it was one of the 5 South colonies, and it was one of the richest, known for exporting.
Yep, very good. All right. You want to share?
The New York colony, it was originally settled by the Dutch in 1613. We built sugar course and then it was taken over by the English in 1630s and
Alright, I'm gonna wrap up that section just because I'm running out of candy at this point. But, so, as you can see, you know, we didn't get to talk about all of them just because we don't have that much time. It would take quite a long time because I did a whole semester on just each one of those colonies basically, so. That being said, all of these colonies have one thing in common, and that is their economies. Despite what purposes they have for founding it, the only thing that a colony can do is export. Colonies, when they're first founded, they don't really have anything they can do except for take the raw materials they have and send them back to wherever they came from. So, the way you can look at it is this, is the colonies, with low prices, they send gold, silver, fur, lumber, and foodstuffs, specifically agricultural products like grain, potatoes, really important, rice, stuff like that. All that goes back to the mother country, in this case it would be Britain, or New York. When the Dutch still had it, it would have been the Netherlands, but then that mother country, like Great Britain, takes those goods and turns them into manufactured goods like fine cloths and like tables and chairs and fine things that you would buy at a store. Think of it like that. And then they ship them back to the colonies for them to buy and pay them with it. So the only way the colonies are making money is if they buy, the mother country buys money or buys their excess materials. So instead of manufacturing their own goods, they had to rely on Britain and other European nations to do it for them, and they still bought it from them in the end. So every colony in this period lacked their own industry. They all had specializations, like the southern states were a lot better at growing year-round. They were able to grow stuff, specifically rice was one of the biggest crops that was grown in the south until we got into cotton and tobacco. But tobacco is pretty much common throughout every single colony, all the way up to Maine, which isn't a colony quite yet, but New Hampshire and all the way down. It didn't grow well up there, but it still grew. So, good enough. So, that's just one thing the old colonies have in common, but at this period in time, they're all controlled by the British, and they all more or less love the British, because why not? They're the ones who gave us this wonderful place to live, why not? So, this is a bit from Ms. Obelheimer's presentation that I found interesting because I didn't know it quite yet, but the war broke out over the Austrian throne. It was given to Marie Theresa, the daughter of the Austrian king, as he has no male heir. Fusion erupted, and Frederick of Prussia would not recognize Maria as the rightly heir, and she allied with Great Britain and France, and so they went to war. So this is how we set up the 7 Years' War, which is between France and Britain. But what you need to understand is that fighting happened in America primarily because war in Europe is hard enough as it is, but the fighting happened in America because there's French colonies up north in Canada and in northern parts of America, or at least the United States, and then there's the U.S. colonies here that are in the south. And so what they were competing for was control over their territories, the waterways for trade, and then the natural resources of North America. And so early skirmishes started as early as 1754. One notable example would be our good friend George Washington, who was attacked at Fort Necessity by the British, or by the French rather. But the war was officially declared between the two nations in 1756, and then we go on to have a long and bloody conflict where the French saw a lot of early success because they had allied with Native Americans up in the northern parts of Canada, in the southern parts of Canada, northern parts of the United States, specifically the Huron tribe. But eventually the British colonists were able to adopt a similar tactic, as well as adopt guerrilla tactics, which wasn't necessarily the British that were doing this, it was the Americans, the British colonists who were fighting the French. So with that, they were able to level the playing field and make the fight more realistic between the French and the British. But then what sealed the deal for British victory was when the British Navy was able to stop French supplies and reinforcements from arriving in the New World. This effectively cut French colonists off from their mother country and meant that they couldn't get more ammunition, more food supplies, nothing like that, no medical supplies as well, and so they basically just waited them out at that point, and then they won. And so it officially ended with the Treaty of Paris in 1763, which the Treaty of Paris is a very common name for treaties. You'll see many of them throughout history. We'll have another one here in just a little bit. Where France ceded a lot of its North American territory to Great Britain and the colonies. However, this put British into massive amounts of debt because now Britain had to go and fight this war, which lasted 7 long years and cost them a nice pretty penny. But the problem with that is now that they have all this new territory they have to protect as well. So they have to continually reinforce this area, pay for supplies, pay for garrisons, all of that to keep this area free from French reoccupation and Native Americans taking it back. So the British solution to this was to tax the colonies because they were already there and they were established. So with that solution, it kind of upset a lot of the colonists, and we're going to get into that. So in theory, the British monarchy and the colonies shared power between each other, but that's not quite how it worked because British Parliament is the one who made most of the decisions on what happened with the colonies, and King George kind of signed off on it and ratified it. And it's not too dissimilar to how our government works. We have a Congress, which is very similar to our Parliament, and we have a president, which is loosely related to a king, but depending on who gets elected, I guess, at any given time. But so they're very similar, they're set up the same way. You have representatives from certain districts who are supposed to talk on your behalf as your representative. Problem with that was that the colonies had no single representative at all in the British Parliament to fight for them when it came to the things like the British tax. So since there was no representation, these acts were passed pretty much unanimously because it made the British money and didn't bother anyone in Great Britain. But it upset a lot of the colonists who had no say in the matter. So some examples include the Stamp Act, the Sugar Act, the Tea Act, the Townshend Act, and then the Intolerable Acts. Two of these acts, the Tea Act and the Intolerable Acts, are one's a precedent for a later massacre, and then one is with the Boston Tea Party. We'll talk about that in a second. But so now I'm going to split you guys up into 4 groups. We're going to work together. Here's the example. I did the Sugar Act first, and I'll go back. I'm going to show you guys which ones you're going to do. You're going to answer what the act did, when the act was enforced, and the colonial reaction to the act. And again, we're going to have about 10 minutes for this one. I want you guys to work within your groups, and when you're ready, just let me know. So the Sugar Act was established in 1764. The act reduced the tax on molasses imported from the Caribbean, but also strictly enforced trade. Regulations and raised new taxes on other imported goods such as sugar, wine, and coffee. Many colonists resented the restrictions on trade and saw the act as an infringement on their economic freedom, and it also raised concerns about taxation without colonial representation in Parliament. So this would have been the first step because this was one of the first taxes that was levied against the colonies. So I'm going to split you guys up really quick and then move around the room, get in your groups, and then you're going to research the act that I assigned you, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. Got it? Okay. So I'll move into our groups really quick. Group 1, you're going to do the Stamp Act. Oh, no, sorry. Yeah, Stamp Act. Group 2, you'll do the Tea Act. Group 3, you'll do the Townshend Acts. And Group 4, you'll do the Intolerable Acts. So everyone move to your groups. 1's right up here. 2's there. 3's in the back right. And then 4's right there in the back left.
Can you go back to the slide where you had your?
Yeah, I'll go back in a second.
Mr. Hossie, I have a timer up there if you want to use it.
Okay.
It's a green little one by the computer.
Yeah. 1. Twos are over on the right, three up in the back right, and then four in the back left.
You can just pull some chairs around if you're fours, you guys. You know where to go? Yes, let's choose one more.
I'm not supposed to be writing it on something.
So you guys are two,
Four.
I do one. You're gonna do the stand back, okay? And I'll go back to the example in a second. Two, you're doing the T act.
Jaden, are you a four?
Three, you guys are doing the Townsend acts. Got it?
Okay, but
Alright.
am I supposed to be writing it down?
Group four,
I would just jot it down on the back of one of your KWLs and have
that or
somebody
just
start
start a
out.
Google Doc quickly and write it down, just information about it. And you guys are doing the intolerable acts, okay?
Can you get my paper?
Remember, answer what the act did, when the act was enforced, and the colonial reaction to the act. So how did the colonies feel about it? What did it do to them? And then when was it enacted? If you guys have questions, you can go ahead and raise your hand and let me know. I'll come around. Yeah, you guys have T. Smoking Sugar Act already was the one I showed you guys. So, Stamp Act was right here for fun. Alright, what do you guys have?
The Stamp Act was a tax passed by the British Parliament in 1765 to raise money for the British organization in the American colonies.
So, and then, so the colonies reacted with strong opposition because, it's that particularly angered colonists is to directly tax them rather than regulating trade the way they expected it to, sparking a rally cry that we talked about already with the no taxation without representation. So very good job. And then, you guys are up next. What do you have? T-Act? Okay. Tell me what happened.
Oh. This is hard. Okay. So the Tea Act reduced the tax on imported British tea. It gave British merchants an unfair advantage in selling their tea in America. America planned to boycott tea by reducing imported British tea. This act gave British merchants an unfair advantage in selling their tea in America. American colonists condemned the act, and many planned to boycott British tea.
So that's exactly what happened. But one of the things that happened, not necessarily a boycott, but this was one of the most official and most notable forms of protest. It was the Boston Tea Party. This was directly in response to the Tea Act in 1773. Since it gave the British East India Company, the tea company that was making all the money, so much like benefit, it obviously upset colonists because they were trying to get their tea for a reasonable price. So in protest, a liberty organization called the Sons of Liberty, these were patriots, a little bit ahead of their time, that they went into the Boston Harbor and they attacked one of these ships and they just threw all the tea into the harbor. And that's effectively what happened with that. And it was celebrated by a lot of the colonists because it was one of the first times that somebody fought back against the British and something of that nature. It was a protest and it strengthened colonial unity against the British policies. So then I have group 3. What do you guys have?
We have Townsend Acts.
That's that. All right, tell us about it.
They impose taxes and regulations on the American colonies and widespread protests and boycotts of British goods and colony demonstrations.
Good job. Second. So yeah, the Townsend Acts were quite upsetting to a lot of colonists. Give me one second. Flip my page. So like I said, it imposed duties on imported goods and including paper, glass, paint, and tea, and allowed British officials to enforce strict custom regulations. It intensified resentment and led to organized boycotts of British goods, like you mentioned, and then it led to violent incidents such as the Boston Massacre, which we're going to talk about briefly. It happened on March 5th, 1770. Since the tensions had already been mounting in Boston, British soldiers were stationed to enforce British laws and protect tax collectors. A confrontation escalated between the British soldiers and a crowd of colonists. A lot of them were college university students in Boston. And basically what ended up happening was whether the students threw stones first or the soldiers shot first, what ended up happening was the soldiers shot into the unarmed crowd, but they shot into the crowd, killing, what was it? Killing 5 colonists, including Crispus Attucks, a dock worker of African and Native American descent. The event was widely publicized as a brutal attack on innocent civilians, fueling anti-British sentiment. Colonial leaders like Samuel Adams used the incident as a rallying point, and Bourdieu is famous engraving the event depicted soldiers as aggressors, further inflaming public outrage. And so this is directly leading into the last act that we have, which is Group 4. So what do you have? Good?
The Intolerable Acts were 4 series of laws that the British Parliament put basically punished on Boston after the Boston Tea Party. These 4 acts were basically, they closed Boston's trade route, they restricted democratic town meetings, and appointed the governor's council. British officials immune to criminal prosecution in Massachusetts and required colonists to house and quarter British troops on demand.
Very good. You got all that. So, intolerable is kind of the name that the colonists gave to it because they found that they were not tolerable. Biggest thing to remember is that it forced the colonists to allow British soldiers to stay in their homes regardless of whether or not they wanted them there or not. Previously, it had been established that they could be garrisoned there by court order or by colonists simply allowing them to stay with them. And that's one of the biggest ones that they saw as a personal breach of civil liberty, but this directly leads to the first establishment of the First Continental Congress, and then with that, it starts the Revolutionary War effectively because this Congress really was with English. And so then we get to our next thing, which is the first battle of the Revolutionary War, technically, because you might want to consider the Boston Massacre one, but the Battle of Lexington in 1775, the British advanced with around 700 soldiers from Boston on the night of April 18th. Paul Revere, William Dawes, and Samuel Prescott rode to the countryside to warn the colonists. And the common phrase that said the British are coming, but in this period, they were not shouting, and they were not, trying to get alerted because they're running in the dead of night. And what they were saying was the regulars are coming because in that period, regulars is what you refer to as a British soldier. And so at dawn on April 19th, the British reached Lexington where 77 local militia people were there. These are 77 colonists armed with their hunting rifle against 700 trained British soldiers. And as you might expect, it didn't go well. The colonists got their butt kicked. It happens. Hey, America loses sometimes. It's all right. But the Edinburgh militia prepared to stand their ground, and so this is what we call the shot heard around the world. This was the first time a colony had fought back against the British and looked like they might stand a chance, because this happened before. The British just destroyed whatever was there. And so whoever shot that first bullet, nobody knows, but either way, the skirmish lasted for only a couple of minutes, where the British fired on what we call Minutemen, killing 8 and wounding several others, with only one British soldier even wounded. So they retreated, ran away, and the British continued on to Concord. Lexington and Concord are both ammunition stockpiles for the colonists, and so they were trying to seize their weapons. And so that's why the 77 were there. They had taken this stockpile and hidden it. And then the rest of it was transported to Concord, where the British reached Concord, and this is the same day, effectively. This is on the 19th. So they just shot at these ragtag band of misfits, 77 of them, and then kicked their butt, and they're like, well, this will be an easy sweep. Went on, searched for the military supplies, but they had already been looted. And so several hundred Minutemen this time from the surrounding towns had gathered because they had enough time being stalled by the original 77. And so the fighting begins at the North Gate. Colonial forces engaged the British troops in a fierce exchange. Several British soldiers were killed or wounded, and the British were forced to fall back. This was the first time the colonial militia successfully repelled the British regulars, and this is the first time. So obviously it didn't work well at Lexington, but first time they did it. And so on the British retreat, the colonists began to do some unorthodox types of fighting, which was guerrilla tactics, which they had learned during the 7 Years' War when they were fighting against the Native Americans and the French. And so they were hiding in the trees, they were shooting at officers, they were doing everything they could to disorganize the very well-regimented and very well-kept British military. And so the colonists were able to inflict heavy casualties on the British, killing or wounding nearly 300 soldiers compared to the 90 American casualties. And casualties includes those that are killed and those that are wounded. So and remember, there's only a couple hundred, so about 300 American colonists are the ones taking on 700 well-trained soldiers, and they were able to do this. So this is the first of the many battles, and not long after this, well, in the same period, I should say, Thomas Paine establishes his persuasive pamphlet Common Sense, where he calls the king a tyrant. You guys have already learned about that, so we don't need to go over it too much. Where he says the colonists are slaves to his rule, and the colonial legislature and First Continental Congress push for independence. But the Declaration of Independence is written and signed by Thomas Jefferson, including many enlightened Enlightenment ideals such as equality, natural rights, popular sovereignty, abolishment of government if rights are not being upheld. So that declaration simply said that we, as a united entity, say that we no longer want to be a part of the British Empire, and that we see that we have rights under, not necessarily God, but rights under man. We inherently have these rights. And so you talked about those Enlightenment ideals already, so I don't need to touch too deeply on those. But after the Battle of Lexington and Concord, and these pamphlets have been published, George Washington, remember from the 7 Years' War, who had a lot of experience in combat, became the head of the Continental Army. And the fighting went on for about 7 years. Some colonists remained loyal to Great Britain, and they were called loyalists. A lot of these people would be called Tories as well. They were magistrates, people of power, people of influence, the people that the British were benefiting, not the poor farmer, blacksmith, gunsmith, whatever you have in the colonists. So these guys are government officials that are the loyalists, and patriots are anyone who's fighting against them. One of the things that the colonies really needed, though, was reinforcements, because there simply wasn't enough of them to go up against a well-maintained army like the British had, and so they called on European allies like France, Spain.
I'll just hang on. It's stop, drop, and roll.
Morning, West High School. We are going to celebrate some PBIS pizza winners. If your name is read, please come right to the main office and get your pizza ordered so we can get that for you today. Freshman being recognized for being welcoming this morning is Reed Mayo, nominated by Ms. Cofield. Sophomore being nominated this morning for being safe, Taylon Brandt, nominated by Mr. Johnson. Our junior nominated for being engaged is Ruby Reyes. Ruby was nominated by Ms. Schaefer.
Oh no, she
And our senior
You
being
suck.
nominated by Ms. Lane is Nathan Case for being engaged and trustworthy. Students and staff, if your name was read, students come order your pizza. Staff, you can come get a candy bar for being the nominating staff member. Congratulations to our 4 students. Have a good day, Westside.
Did they call your name?
Yeah.
Oh, they did? I didn't even hear it. I just heard Ruby and then somebody else.
No, I went before Ruby. They called Ruby after.
Who was the teacher?
Mr. Johnson.
Oh. Who was the freshman?
Something there.
Someone I don't know.
Mayo?
Something.
Mayo?
Reed?
Well, anyways.
Was it Reed?
So,
Oh, okay.
we'll continue on really quick.
Okay.
So they
love
called on
Domino's,
European
don't
allies that were surrounding England on the main continent, so like France, Spain, the Dutch Republic, remember New Amsterdam. They all ended up giving in engaged support to the United States, especially because, remember, the French just lost the war to the British only a couple of decades prior in the 7 Years' War. And so they were like, yeah, of course we'll help you. We want to make back the land we lost, stuff like that. So eventually, through many, many years and a lot of fighting, a lot of death, blood, gore, all that, General Cornwallis, the leader of the British armies in the Americas, surrendered at Yorktown after the Battle of Yorktown on October 19, 1781. And this was the final battle of the Revolutionary War, which resulted in the Treaty of Paris again being signed in 1783, which recognized the United States as its own nation and granted territory to the new states. The United States now controlled the land all the way to the Mississippi River, which, if we go back a couple slides, Mississippi River is way over there, well past the mitten of Michigan. So, big land gain for the U.S., and now it's a new nation. So, after the war, though, they were no longer had the British to prop them up. They effectively were on their own. They had to, and they no longer had that biggest buyer of their raw materials. Remember, they were exporting primarily to Britain, and now they don't have it. So they have to find new people to do that. And another thing that was worrying them was not just being poor, but also that they would have another tyrant come to power, and so they were worried that another King George would appear. And so they created the Articles of Confederation, which is considered to be the first constitution, which created a weak central government where individual states could overrule other states, and there was no power to deal with national problems. And so later we get into the revision that's needed, but you need to fully understand that this was the worst thing ever. It just descended into chaos where every state had their own currency system, and so if you wanted to buy something in New Hampshire, you had to have something from New York. It was just a pain in the butt. So, and also the inflation rate wasn't the same because there's no establishment of the dollar, which now we have that. So, boom. So then the Constitution that we wrote, that we have today still, created the federal system where the national government and state governments share power. They used Montesquieu's ideas of the three branches of the government to separate the powers and have systems of checks and balances in place. You guys have already touched on Montesquieu, I'm assuming, with the Enlightenment thinkers. And then it included the Bill of Rights, which dealt with our basic freedoms and natural rights imposed by Enlightenment thinkers. So this marked the first time anyone had ever beaten the British, but specifically a colony. The English and the British have lost wars throughout history before this point, but they haven't lost to a colony. They've lost to an equal power like Spain or like France or like something like that. Something of that nature in their hemisphere. Not to 13 colonies several thousands of miles away from them, where it takes 12 months to get there on a ship. So it was unprecedented that this ever happened, and so this set in motion a bunch of new revolutions, which you guys will talk about soon, with the French Revolution and the Industrial Revolution, because it's the first time, again, that this kind of stuff has happened, and it's got motion. So, like I said, first one, but to my understanding, you guys have an assignment on campus. In a text box, answer the following questions. What were the causes and effects of the American Revolution? How did Enlightenment thinking influence the Revolution and the writing of the Constitution? And then pick one amendment from the Bill of Rights to explain why you think this amendment is important. And so, go ahead and look those up, the first 10, but personally, I think the first one's the most important.
Yeah.
The second one doesn't work out. But that's me done for this part, I believe. Thank you for your patience, guys. I understand that it's not necessarily. But I appreciate you guys helping me out and working with me. And so I think this whole hierarchy has a couple things to say. Give us a moment. I know, but I have my laptop set up too. Hopefully you sit on.
Alright, you guys, yes, on campus, in our module 2, right after our world history trivia module, is a new module. It's where our